Welcome everyone to our annual GOTY 30 award show. This is Retro Logic, and this is the one time a year where we don't do a normal episode. We do our famous now amongst other people amongst our own community, famous here on Retro Logic for being our award show where we talk about a year 30 years in the past. So we're not doing an award show for 2024. No, this is Retro Logic. We're talking about 1994, a year chock full of games. This was probably going to be one of our most difficult years ever. Like, internal conflicts going on. I can feel it with this whole crew. And so let's introduce the crew that we have tonight. We have me, obviously, Dan, hosting you, bringing you through our show as we go along here. And we have John Cummins, who's here.
Yep.
We got Adam.
Yeah.
My own brother. We have Spider Shan.
Hello there.
And of course, bringing up the rear is Sam.
Hello.
Yes, and so we're here tonight. We're here to give you guys a good show. And so here's how things are going to play out on the show. We're going to go through each category and sort of list off the nominations. We have several categories, including like one for each console that was around for this year, or most consoles, and then a few other specialty nominations. And then we're each going to take turns and kind of explain why we're giving our choice, vote on what we think should win, and it's a majority vote. So whatever game gets the most votes wins. If there's a tie, we're going to have further discussions to see if anybody wants to switch sides. It is possible to end with a tie, so, we'll just see how that turns out. I want to make sure that we have our community game of the year on here too. And Adam, I think you accidentally erased one of our games again. Would you fix that real quick?
I was trying to. I couldn't figure out what it was.
Can you just undo or whatever?
How do I do that?
There's a little arrow at the top of says undo. There, hey, we got it back. We're
get rid of that.
Yeah, man. I wasn't going to let that slide.
It was unintentional.
We're a well-oiled machine here. Well, without further ado, we've already talked too much. Let's jump right into our first category, which is the oldest console being represented this year, still coming out with games in 1994, is Best NES Game. We only have 4 nominations for this category. The nominations are Mega Man 6, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 2, Wario's Woods, and Zoda's Revenge, Star Tropics 2. So why don't we start with John? John, what's your pick for Best NES Game?
I think as much as I would like to do Chip 'n Dale, because it's a really fun game, it has to go to Mega Man 6. Like, the other games on this list are kind of late. And I think if I'm remembering right, Wario's Woods is like the last Nintendo game for the NES, right? The last Nintendo published game.
Yeah, Nintendo published.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
That tracks.
Yeah, no, Mega Man 6 for me.
Okay, sweet. And then, Adam, what's your NES Game of the Year?
Yeah, that's an easy one for me. I'm a big Mega Man fan, so I've never played Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 2, as big a fan I am of the first one. Wario's Woods is actually a pretty decent puzzle game, but it's also on the Super Nintendo, and there's nothing that makes the NES version special in any way. And I've actually, despite owning it, I've never played Zoda's Revenge. I have a bone to pick with the game for having the subtitle reversed, and so it screws up my alphabetized shelf, and I hate it for that reason.
That alone made it lose.
But gotta go with Mega Man 6. When you look at those later Mega Man games like 5 and 6 and compare them to some of the early Super Nintendo games, they're very close. Like, they were pushing that hardware as hard as they could. And Mega Man 6 is the clear winner here, I think.
Awesome. Spider Shan.
Yeah, so as much as I love Tropics 2, you have to give it to Mega Man 6. It is, it really is a better game. It's the graphics, like Adam was saying, the music, like it's banging. There's no way you can't give it to that. So I'm gonna go with Mega Man 6 as well.
All right, sweet.
Still landslide.
Yeah, a little bit. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, we know what Sam's going to pick.
Yeah, I'm a Mega Man fan, and this is the year of peak Mega Man. There's going to be a lot of Mega Man on this list. Spoilers, I don't think I'll be voting for Mega Man every time it appears. But this time, yes, Mega Man 6, absolutely. The games were definitely treading over well-tread ground at this point, but credit where it's due. Mega Man 6 is still really, really good. I mean, a lot of Mega Man fans, their favorite out of the classics is probably either 2 or 3. But I think 6 in particular is really good just because of like the rush adapter, the jetpack mode Mega Man gets is really fun. This had the multiple exits from each stage as well, so a little bit more variety. It did the double castle thing, which I wasn't a fan of. They started doing that from 4 on just to kind of give you more levels, but I always felt like the first castle just was weak level wise. That's kind of the case here. And this is where they weren't even trying to hide Dr. Wily. This is the one with Mr. X, Wily wearing some sunglasses.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
good.
picking your favorite Mega Man game out of the early ones is kind of like picking your favorite Zelda game. Just because you like one better doesn't mean the other one's a bad one. They're all pretty good.
That's fair. Well, we do have a bit of a landslide here, and I don't really have a dog in this fight. I haven't played any of these games, so obviously we're going to give it to Mega Man 6 for best NES game. Congrats to Mega Man 6. Moving right along swiftly. Yeah, easy win.
Probably one of the easier ones in this.
This is where things start getting. I'm really curious how everybody's going to go on this one. So we've got best SNES game, and I almost feel like we should have done Genesis first, but we're just going to roll with it. The nominees for best NES game are, which is like, a list of just whatever. You'll know once you hear it. Mega Man X, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy III, Super Metroid, Illusion of Gaia, Super Bomberman 2, Super Punch-Out, and Maximum Carnage. So
this is a toughie.
Yeah. Adam, you go first.
Oh, gee. Thanks.
Hot potato. You go.
Well, this is it's not necessarily hard for me because I have my favorites. Like I have a very well thought out, curated top 100 list of my favorite games. So all I have to do is look at my top 100 list of games and look for the first Super Nintendo game that is on this list. And it's Super Metroid. I mean, Mega Man X is incredible. Donkey Kong Country is just absolutely one of the best games of all time. Final Fantasy III continued my RPG awakening after Dragon Quest on the NES. Illusion of Gaia deserves to be mentioned. It's a really, I think, underappreciated game. But for my money, it's got to be Super Metroid. I'm just such a big fan. It did things that have continued through the franchise to this very day with the map and the special weapons and stuff like that. Just one of the best and most replayable games of all time. I love Donkey Kong Country. I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but man,
we will.
for me, it goes to Super Metroid.
Solid choice. And Shannon.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, when you look at this list, the only way you can make it harder is if we were to, if this was the year that Link to the Past and Super Mario World also came out, because this is like when people talk about the best games ever on the Super Nintendo, or even sometimes just period, some of these games appear on the list. And for me, you know, the four listed at the top here: Mega Man X, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy III, and Super Metroid. Man, that's a hard choice right there.
So hard.
It really is. And part of me is like, well, do I go just on what's my favorite, or do I go on which one I think is really actually the best?
Yeah.
But I have to give it to Final Fantasy III. To me, that's the game that is my favorite RPG of all time. Just beating out some of the Dragon Quest games, but it is the quintessential 16-bit era RPG, hands down. The music, the graphics, the gameplay, all the different characters you can recruit, really is practically a perfect game.
Okay, awesome. And next is Sam.
Yeah, as others have said, those first four games are all games that pretty much belong on everyone's like top 20 Super Nintendo games list. And so a lot of credit to those, to the point where I felt bad putting Illusion of Gaia here, because it feels like
It's a good game,
even though
it is a good game.
We have an underdog award, and so I debated moving it there so it could still get an award, but I really think it deserves to be here. So I just want to kind of emphasize that. I kind of landed there with Super Punch Out as well. It feels like it doesn't stand a chance, but Super Punch Out is great. It's a really worthy follow-up to Punch Out, but sadly, Punch Out just doesn't quite have the enduring legacy that these other franchises do. It's just a simpler game. Obviously, I love Donkey Kong Country as much as the next guy, unless the next guy is Dan, which I guess he is probably the next guy based on the order I think we're going in.
Yeah.
So I don't. There's only one of these games that I play every year at Christmas. It's Mega Man X. This is, in a way, not a very hard choice for me. In the spirit of Xmas, I have to say Mega Man X. This is consistently what I call my favorite Super Nintendo game and my favorite game of all time.
Okay. Yeah, great. So, I mean, we all know how this is going to go. I don't have to belabor this very much. So, I will just say a few things. The fact that it's so spread out already is just a testament to how amazing this year is for both consoles, for NES and Sega Genesis, because we're going to talk about Sega Genesis next. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was a tough choice, but the only other game on this list that gave me pause was Super Metroid, which I actually played for the first time ever pretty recently, like a year or 2 years ago or so, which honestly just blew me away how well it held up, how much better, or how on par or better it was than most modern indie games of the same ilk. My choice is Donkey Kong Country. We all knew that. Donkey Kong Country, I think, not only is my personal favorite game of all time, but I think it's sort of began kind of like almost like a new era of what was possible on the Super Nintendo at the time. Super Nintendo being out, for 2 years at this point, this was kind of like the second renaissance of the Super Nintendo in '94, with all these games coming out, including Donkey Kong Country. But Donkey Kong Country sort of blew me away visually, and then continued to blow me away as I continued to play it, and learned all the secrets, and it played like a Mario game, and it was just sort of like taking that next step as a platformer. So that's it for me. And now John has the opportunity to basically choose a winner, unless he chooses something else. So take it away, John.
I mean, knowing John, it could be Super Bomberman 2.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I added it to the list because I thought he might want to.
I didn't add it to the list because as much as I love Super Bomberman, it's not quite the same caliber of game as some of these other ones. It's kind of like Super Punch Out. It's pretty basic gameplay. This one did add the ability to use the multi-tap. So
I added Maximum Carnage to this list. I love Maximum Carnage. It's not the best beat 'em up of all time, but it's certainly very, very good, and we needed that sort of like genre differentiation on the list. So
yeah,
but yeah, go ahead, John.
This could have been, you could have named this category Dan convinces others to vote Donkey Kong.
I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be better. Trying to be a better version of myself.
I think, though, if I'm honest, and with as much as I've played all of the games, the first 4 games that you guys have selected, I'm probably going to have to go with Final Fantasy as like Shannon. I love Donkey Kong Country, not as much as Dan, but it was like the first Super Nintendo game that I kind of like I played it enough to where I could beat it in like an hour and just sleep it, play it. But Final Fantasy 3 was probably peak Final Fantasy for at least half of the fans of Final Fantasy. Like to the point where I don't even have hardly any experience with the newer games at all. This is kind of where it stopped for me. And just the complexity of the game and how you could have so many different party members in this game, and like how everything, you would leave party members and then come back. Like it was crazy how the story was put together in this game. So I think that alone, I think this game is hard to beat. So that's where my vote goes.
All right. I'm messaging Liam in Discord right now that he's making me lose Donkey Kong Country right now because
Donkey Kong. That's his message.
He was my shoe-in. He can't vote. He's not on the show, but I was gonna message him. He's my guy.
Mail-in.
I know.
Mail-in
vote. We'll find out tomorrow. No, fair and square. Final Fantasy 3 is the best SNES and NES game for 1994. I'll concede fair and square. Unless somebody wants to change, I'm not going to fight you on it. But
No, and I'll just add, like, if I was prepared to acquiesce to Final Fantasy 3 as my second choice, if it came down to like a tiebreaker, because that's the two that would have been the most difficult to pick between for me.
Right on.
You can't go wrong with any of them, really. Honestly.
It's a tough choice.
Yeah.
See, this was my plan for recruiting Shannon to the show, and he would vote like I do.
Man,
Sneaky.
should have texted Liam sooner. All right. Well, congratulations, Final Fantasy 3, the best Super Nintendo game. Plenty more awards to go around. Let's move right along to best Sega Genesis game. And I mean, a longer list on the Genesis side than there is on the SNES side. I added quite a few games here. So yeah, let's jump right in. We start with Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Castlevania Bloodlines, Dynamite Headdy, Streets of Rage 3, Rocket Knight Adventures, Shining Force 2, Mega Man The Wily Wars, Mega Bomberman, Jurassic Park Rampage Edition, and Ecco Tides of Time. Some real bangers on this list. And we're going to let Shannon go ahead and go first this time.
Yeah, so I only got to play probably a couple of these when they would have released back in '94, and that was probably Sonic 3, and I believe Jurassic Park. I probably played around that time because I did not actually have a Genesis until much later as an adult. So depended on friends to play a lot of these games. But I have played quite a few of these games since. Dynamite Headdy is actually very quirky and kind of crazy. But I think I'm probably going to have to go. This kind of hurts me because I'm not a big Sonic fan, but I'll probably have to give it to Sonic 3. I think of the original trilogy of Sonic games, I think Sonic 3 is the peak. So yeah, I'm gonna lock it in with Sonic 3.
All right, Sonic 3. Not a bad choice, honestly.
I can't argue that.
Yeah, considered one of the best 2D Sonic games of all time, so not a bad choice at all. Sam.
Yeah, I just want to get out ahead of this and say that Sonic the Hedgehog games are garbage. And I know it's going to win because there's so many other games on here that it's going to get like 2 votes and the rest are going to be split up or something. Yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog. I've played the games. I don't understand it. The conclusion I have been led to is that people, when you ask people what they like about Sonic, they don't even talk about the games. They talk about the character or their nostalgia for being a kid and owning a Genesis, or like, it's not about the game. It's about being susceptible to marketing as a kid. But
it's all that blast processing
onto
the head.
Yeah.
Hey, gotta go fast, Sam. Gotta go fast.
Yeah. Mega Man's on here. I don't think I'm gonna give it to Mega Man: The Wily Wars, mostly because I didn't really enjoy replaying the NES games on Genesis. I kind of don't think it's the best way to play them. What it does that's really great is the Wily Castle at the end, where you actually get to pick from all the weapons you get across all 3 games. That's really cool. But other than that, it's really fun. But like, if I want to play Mega Man 2, I'd rather get the NES version of Mega Man 2. So kind of similarly, Streets of Rage 3, I like it, but I also would rather play Streets of Rage 2. I think Streets of Rage 2 is the better game overall, especially if we're talking specifically about the North American release. And since we're going off those release dates, I take it to mean that we are. Because that's one where they artificially cranked the difficulty so that people couldn't beat the game on a rental. Like if you talk to people who are big into beat 'em ups, they'll tell you, make sure that you play the Japanese Bare Knuckle 3 and not Streets of Rage 3. So it's really actually between Dynamite Headdy and Castlevania Bloodlines for me. And I think I'm going to tip it to Castlevania Bloodlines. I like Dynamite Headdy a lot, but a lot of what I like is just for how weird it is. I think when it comes to just fundamental core gameplay, Castlevania takes it.
Okay, fair. Methodical and opinionated. And that's why we like you, Sam. As somebody who loves Sonic the Hedgehog because the games are fun, I added Jurassic Park Rampage Edition on here because Sega being the home of a couple of the best Jurassic Park games, we couldn't not talk about it. Rampage Edition being the sequel to basically the spiritual sequel to the original Jurassic Park game, where you could be the raptor, which is an excellent game. They're both very, very good. So I want to make sure that we mention it here. Other than that, the games I've played on this list are Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Dynamite Headdy. And I'm with Sam on Dynamite Headdy, where it's a game that I adore with every fiber of my being, but will never win on any best games list, simply because it does have its problems, but it's so weird and unique and awesome that it deserves to be talked about. That being said, for me, it's between Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, and I go Sonic 3. I feel like it's such a slight thing, but like I love Knuckles as a character, but those games, I almost feel like Sonic and Knuckles, I'm just playing more of Sonic 3, which is not a bad thing. But if I'm going to go with one or the other, it's going to hit Sonic 3 for me first. So I'm going Sonic 3. And John, your turn.
All right. So I think the only game out of this whole list that I haven't played is Ecco. So hey, here we have another Bomberman game that I'm not going to go for because it's not the best way to play that Bomberman game. So kind of
Actually, slight correction, because I thought I removed this from the early draft, but it might have stuck around working on different, because I think Mega Bomberman did not release in North America till, I think, because oddly enough, they released earlier in Europe. So I think I just saw the second release date that wasn't Japan and thought that was it. But yeah, so I don't think it's actually even eligible.
Okay.
You made it even easier. And then I played Shining Force 2 earlier this year. We played it for Retro Rewind. It was pretty good. But I kind of like Sam. I think I'm going to have to give this to Castlevania just due to Sonic 3 is not really my jam either. I appreciate Sonic for the small part they played in gaming, I guess. But I don't really enjoy Sonic games that much either.
That's what I'm telling you. Even Sonic fans don't enjoy Sonic games that much.
Yeah, I mean, but I also agree with Shane.
Enjoy being Sonic fans.
It's peak Sonic. Like you definitely peak 2D Sonic, I guess. You could definitely go way faster in this game without being obliterated right away. But definitely Castlevania. Way more fun to be had in that game.
All right, cool. Whatever. Adam, you have a tiebreaker here. You may not even vote for either of these games, but it's on you.
Yeah. So I've been sort of reconsidering what my pick has been for the past few days or however long it's been since we started compiling these categories. I really like Dynamite Headdy. I really like Rocket Knight Adventures. I didn't play either of these Jurassic Park or Ecco games, despite how much I liked the first Jurassic Park Genesis game and the original Ecco. So I'm going to go a little bit left field, and we'll have to figure out y'all will figure out the tiebreaker on your own, okay? So in 94, and I've talked about this before, but as much of a Nintendo fan as I am, and as much as I have no interest in collecting any retro stuff other than Nintendo, at least at this chapter of my life, in 94, in the early 90s, I was a Genesis kid. I had, Dan eventually got a Super Nintendo. I had a couple friends that had a Super Nintendo, but my closer friends, I got a Genesis because, playing games like Strider and Altered Beast and Sonic the Hedgehog at my friend's house, and I loved it. So at early 90s, I didn't have any friends that even had a Super Nintendo, so I asked my parents for a Genesis for Christmas, so that's what I got. So I'm going to actually go a little bit left field, and I want to talk about Sonic and Knuckles for a second, just for a quick second. The fact that you could plug in Sonic 3 and Sonic 2 to Sonic and Knuckles and play as Knuckles in those older games, it was almost like the first version of console DLC because it changed the gameplay. Because Knuckles can climb up walls, like just straight vertically up with his knuckles, just knuckle his way up the walls, which made traversal of those levels that you've played in previous games different. You could reach areas that you couldn't reach previously. So all these other games, well, most of these other games are great, but a lot of them are either sequels or they're not necessarily doing anything that is particularly unique. So I'm going to pick Sonic and Knuckles for that reason.
All right. Totally agree with you on that, Adam. That was mind blowing at the time. But I don't think that anybody's going to concede one way or the other. I don't know. Shannon, do you feel like voting for Castlevania Bloodlines?
No. I'm going to stick with Sonic.
So, Adam, I think you have to choose our tiebreaker.
Oh,
if that's okay with Sam.
I thought I was going to get out of having to be the tiebreaker here.
You still have to pick one.
Unless John or Sam want to vote for Sonic, which doesn't seem likely. So
I think Sam.
You already voted for a Sonic game.
You're right.
Yeah.
I think I know how this ends.
Unless
you want to make the right choice.
I love. Okay. I don't want to turn this into a whole thing because these episodes go so long, right? But these are some games that, like, I would never waste my time to go back and play these Sonic games because I enjoyed them. I legitimately enjoyed playing them. And if we had more time, I could articulate what I did enjoy about them. But it is not what I enjoy about games anymore. It's not something that I like going back to and playing like Mario. I could play through Mario NES or Super Nintendo Mario games or Donkey Kong games 1,000 times and still enjoy them. I wouldn't even waste my time to go back and play these Sonic games. They are not fun for me, at least anymore. When I was 12, they were. But you look at the games on the list, right? You've got Sonic 3. Okay, it's just Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, but a little bit better. Streets of Rage 3. Okay, it's a sequel, and as Sam pointed out, it might not even be as good as Streets of Rage 2. Shining Force 2. Okay, another sequel. Mega Man: The Wily Wars. It's the NES games with prettier graphics and worse music. Like, I mean, most of these are just iterations and not doing anything particularly special. I love Castlevania, but the problem is I haven't played Castlevania Bloodlines.
We could just stay at a time.
We need to remedy that.
By your own admission, Sonic 3 is not worth going back to. I submit to you that Castlevania Bloodlines is worth playing at least once now.
It probably is, but I've never played it.
Though I'll also admit it's not as good as Super Castlevania 4, but
no. Definitely feels
so I'm at an impasse with myself because I cannot, in good conscience, pick Sonic 3 for the best Genesis game of '94.
I'm good. I'm good with a tie.
But I've never played with Castlevania.
I'm happy with it.
I think didn't we do this before where we held it at a tie here and then asked the community to vote on it?
To decide.
Yeah, do that soundtrack last year, I think.
Yeah.
We could do that.
Maybe we'll just do that again.
That's fine.
Yeah, I can't in good conscience go either way on that one simply because I haven't played Castlevania Bloodlines and I don't think Sonic 3 deserves it, to be honest.
So weird. I understand why the fan base, people don't like the fan base. Like, I get that. I'm not part of the fan base. I disengage from it.
Fan base?
Yeah. They're not my people.
It has nothing to do with this.
No,
These shows would not believe you. You fought so hard for Sonic 2.
It's weird. No, because I genuinely love the games. Because the games are the thing that I like, not whatever, whatever. Whatever. Let's move on. I'm already getting mad. It's only the third one. It's like the third award.
At least it's not about Donkey Kong Country.
No, I have made my peace. Made my peace with Donkey Kong Country. I already know what's peak. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to what we're going to do for Genesis. Is we are going to put it to a vote to the community, and the community will decide whether Sonic 3 or Castlevania Bloodlines wins best Sega Genesis game. For now, we're going to move on to best handheld game. There's a mix of Game Boy and Game Gear games here. That should say Game Gear. It's pretty obvious, but whatever. I'll do my best with that. And I will list them off. We have Shining Force, Sword of Hajya. I'm going to say Hajya, but I don't know what it really is. For Game Gear. X-Men for Game Gear. Donkey Kong for Game Boy, also known as Donkey Kong 94. Mario Land 3, Wario Land for Game Boy. Mega Man 5 for Game Boy. Wario Blast for Game Boy. Lemmings for Game Boy, and Contra the Alien Wars for Game Boy. And kicking us off this time is going to be Sam, actually. Go for it, Sam.
So I replayed Mega Man 5 just yesterday, actually, on the Game Boy. That is worth pointing out. I think the last couple Game of the Year 30s, we've had the Mega Man Game Boy games, Mega Man World, I think is what it's called in Japan, on the list. And the thing about those is they're basically kind of like inferior remixed versions of the NES games to an extent, except then they'll actually add in some like new bosses. The levels are kind of reworked. Like the first game, I think is very rough. Mega Man, the first Mega Man on Game Boy. But they started to kind of come into their own later. And by Mega Man 5, it's actually a completely original game. They're not reusing bosses from Mega Man 5 and 6 anymore. It's actually all new bosses, all new weapons. It is absolutely like 100% just as good as the NES games. It's really good. But I think I'm actually going to go with Donkey Kong 94. Donkey Kong 94 is just a very special type of game. Not one that I had played for a long time, but I can only imagine if this was brand new to you at the time and you were familiar with the Donkey Kong arcade game, just having your mind blown by playing Donkey Kong, expecting it's just Donkey Kong. And then there's actually there's 10 times more content to the game than that.
Yeah. It's like hardly anything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's like the first
80
levels. It's insane. And just, this is the same year Donkey Kong Country came out, but it's actually really interesting to see what Nintendo was doing with Donkey Kong themselves before they kind of handed it off to Rare. And it's really clever platforming. So I think I will give it to Donkey Kong 94.
All right.
They need to do this again.
They do. Yeah. Well, they turned this series into Mario and Donkey Kong, which I'm not mad about.
Multiple Donkey Kong games release in the same year again.
How about a single Donkey Kong game?
Or any Donkey Kong game that's not.
They released a Donkey Kong game last year.
Even just for Nintendo to internally work with Donkey Kong themselves.
Yeah.
There's hints maybe they're starting to do that. Because, before they passed them off to Retro, and then they passed them off to Rare, and then they passed them off to Retro. So.
Yeah. Bring them home. I don't disagree. I am going to go now for best handheld, and the thing, in a shocking turn of events, I'm actually torn between Donkey Kong 94, which I agree is superb and an amazing way to play the classic arcade game with just a ton of extra content, and Wario Land, which is, this was the game that sort of made Wario his own thing. It wasn't just the villain in a Mario game. It was, here's Wario taking his own stab at what a platformer starring him should be like. I fired this game up recently on the virtual console with my kids in the room, and we we laughed our butts off the whole time. I mean, he's like farting and he's like doing silly things, and like when he gets hurt, it's like a funny animation. And then I think this is the one that has like costumes and stuff. Like it's crazy. This game is just Nintendo being weird at its best. And so it is weirdly a hard decision for me to make, because as much as I love Donkey Kong 94, Wario Land is really high up there in my head. Gosh. I think I am actually going to give it to Wario Land here. Yeah. I think I'm giving it to Wario Land. So, I don't know. I'm a weird one. Let's just leave it at that. And next up is John.
So, yeah. No, Wario Land is a good choice. I like Wario Land as well. But I think that Wario Land really starts to hit its stride after this game. I think they're still kind of experimenting.
Was I playing Wario Land 3, maybe? Maybe I was playing.
I don't know which game you were playing.
now it's all up in the air. Oh, crap.
Just saying, no, Wario Land's good.
Wario Land 3 was on Game Boy Color.
Yes.
Is that on... Are they all on Virtual Console?
I believe so.
Oh, crap.
But...
No, it was this one.
Not saying the original game is bad, but it still has more of like... There's still more Mario DNA in it. It's not quite Wario Land yet. But it gets there. You keep going with it. But like Sam, like Donkey Kong 94 is hands down the best game on this list. Like, it is insane how much extra they put into it and just how much they changed the mechanics of the game. Like, it was just a brand new game. And they are doing like some very early trolling, like before the internet. It's a big deal. Because you just start playing, like you play the arcade game, you have, and I don't even know if anyone had mentioned it in magazines or anything yet, but yeah, it just totally changes on you. It's a totally different game. And even just the influence that it has on other Mario games, like being able to do handstands and a long jump, all those things get implemented into Mario 64. I mean, it's an incredible game.
All right.
Super Game Boy support too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Well, it is worth noting Mega Man 5 had some of that too. It had a special border and colors programmed for it.
I love that stuff. All right. Adam, best handheld game.
I mean, I know we're pressed for time. I got to give it to Donkey Kong 94. Like, there's other good games on this list. I haven't played all of them. I might have actually only played about half the games on the list. But in keeping with the theme of innovation, Donkey Kong 94 is insanely good.
All right, sweet. This is a weird, bizarro turn of events, but I like it. Shannon, Shannon, go ahead.
I mean, my vote doesn't really matter here, but I will say that it took me a long time to come around on on Wario Land, simply because I love Mario Land 2. And so I felt betrayed, as much as, I'm really, obviously entitled, that we didn't get another Mario game, that they gave it to the villain. And that was my thing. Now, looking back and playing the game now, I can see that it actually is a pretty good game. But like John said, I feel like they kind of perfect it a little later on in the series. And so I'm obviously going to go Donkey Kong here as well. This is one I had no idea when initially I always knew there was a Donkey Kong game on Game Boy, but I legitimately always just thought it was the arcade. And I'm like, oh, I already got other ways to play that. And it wasn't until years later that somebody's like, no, dude, there's like, that's just the beginning. And then you go into all these other levels. And I've unfortunately my battery pack has worn out. I need to figure out how to replace that.
Oh, bummer.
I know it. Otherwise, I got to play through the whole thing in one sitting. But the game is so much fun, and one of the things that still boggles my mind is how well it controls for a Game Boy game. Like the controls feel really, really smooth, and that is not something I could say with a lot of Game Boy games. As much as I love the Game Boy, so yep, I'm gonna give it to Donkey Kong.
I think what makes the controls work so good is that the way they design the levels are like almost to one screen. So like they're not trying to work without their, outside of their means on the Game Boy. So I think it helped it.
Yeah.
So everyone voted for the Donkey Kong game except for Dan.
Except for Dan.
Well, and I may have
But he
played
voted for the Bomberman game.
I may have played the wrong Wario Land game, but I'm not going to change my vote because it doesn't matter anyway. Because Donkey Kong 94 is the best handheld game of 1994. Yes, still waiting for Donkey Kong 95 to come out, but let's move right along. Yeah, annualized Donkey Kong. That would be my dream. Best PC game. Yeah, we got some heavy hitters in here. We have Elder Scrolls Arena, XCOM UFO Defense, Star Wars TIE Fighter, Doom 2, King's Quest 7, Warcraft Orcs and Humans. Wait, what? The original Warcraft came out in 94? No way.
Yep.
And System Shock. And Sam, you started last time, right? So I think I'm going first this time. Yahaha. Okay, so I've played probably half of these. And the game on this list that, to me, I still hear in my head and see when I close my eyes is Warcraft. And now I may be thinking of Warcraft 2. I don't care. I'm voting Warcraft.
You probably are, but yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if this game started the legacy that became Warcraft 2, that became StarCraft, that became StarCraft 2, all games that I adore and dumped thousands of hours into, then it deserves my vote. So, job's done. John, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a few games on here with Elder Scrolls and Doom 2 being pretty good contenders as well, but similar to Dan, Warcraft, this is my first foray into real-time strategy, so I've got a lot of nostalgia for that game, and I too can hear the workers every time they cut a tree down or I tell them to go do something. So
yeah,
I definitely played more Warcraft 2 because it was definitely more polished, but the first game is still good. It's probably kind of hard to go back to now if you're used to playing modern Warcraft games. Well, I guess I say modern, but heck, the last one's 15 years old or older now.
I know, crazy.
But yeah, Warcraft.
All right. Adam, go for it.
Well, I think that as much as I wanted to stick to my theme of innovation, I did play Warcraft 2 and did not play the original Warcraft. I know that for a fact. I played 2 or 3 of the King's Quest games. I have no idea if this is one of the ones that I played or not. Either way, it's iteration upon iteration. I did play TIE Fighter. I loved those those early Star Wars kind of flight simulator
fighter games.
Those are good.
This wasn't my favorite, but I did play it. But I'm gonna actually vote for Doom 2. Doom was huge for me on PC in the early 90s, and had so much fun with it. And I really think it's the best game on this list, if I'm being perfectly honest with myself.
Now,
I wanted to vote for Warcraft, but I know for a fact that I never played the original Warcraft. I started with Warcraft 2.
Doom 2 was it wasn't a shooter. What was it? Wasn't it like a strategy game or something? Am I crazy?
Yes.
Okay, I'm crazy. Let's move on. Happy to move on from that. Shannon.
Maybe I'm thinking of Dune 2, which Warcraft owes quite a bit to.
It's very possible. Shannon, your turn.
So yeah, I mean, Elder Scrolls was not even a blimp on my radar until Morrowind. So, I've been able to go back and dabble a little bit just to see what it was like. I mean, it's still pretty set into what those kind of games were at the time. Those kind of first person dungeon crawler. King's Quest was always a series that I always read about in magazines that I thought sounded so cool, but I never ever got the opportunity to play. And Warcraft, I did not touch until Warcraft 2. So I actually am going to give this one to TIE Fighter. I got to stick with my Star Wars. I do remember playing a lot of this. Yes, there are definite other better ones out there. This is not top of that series. However, it was a lot of fun, and I still put a lot of time into it. It was still getting to fly around in a TIE Fighter.
Right. All right, sweet. And last but not least, Sam, you have an opportunity here for an upset or a win or whatever you want to do.
I'm just going to split it further. I'll just tip my hand. My vote goes to XCOM UFO Defense, which means Warcraft wins.
Kind of crazy. Yeah, the under 6 early XCOM game this early.
Yeah. And it's interesting. This whole category, really, most of these are colored by the games that came later.
Yeah.
I haven't played the original UFO Defense, and I was actually surprised how well it holds up. Because, I was coming to it based on how much I like Enemy Unknown, which obviously is a much, much later game. But the core of what makes that game work was in UFO Defense. It's just presented it's a little bit more streamlined and presented better in, what is that, 2008, whenever Enemy Unknown came out, 2012, something like that.
Way later.
Yeah, a lot later. You'll be waiting a while to hear about that on Game of the Year 30. But yeah, it really, it kind of balances strategy and tactics in a way very few other games do well. And that's what I appreciate about it. Obviously, I love my strategy games. Warcraft is great too, but I didn't even play a Warcraft game until 3, and I've never actually gone back to the older ones. Warcraft 1 is definitely a bit more bare bones compared to what comes later.
Yeah, they're hard
most
to go
of the two factions are basically identical other than cosmetics and one unit.
Yeah.
I definitely played 1 now that I'm thinking about it. But Sam, to your point on XCOM feels very much like a Dan game. I love Mario vs. Rabbids and Codename Steam and those kinds of almost like real-time strategy cover shooter type games. I love those games. and XCOM totally is in my wheelhouse. I've just never played one. I own the collection on Switch, and I have to go play it. But
Yeah, the modern ones, the old game is definitely a lot more brutal and a lot more opaque. It's just not clear what systems are in play at each time.
Right.
It's because we used to have more time to play them.
Yeah. Let me sit here for 2 hours.
Especially PC games used to just come with like a 200-page manual.
Oh yeah, strategy games are the worst because you would have to play for like 10 hours just to even get a feel of how to do everything.
All right. So, best PC game of 1994 is Warcraft. Original Warcraft. Who thought?
I'm a little surprised nobody stood up for System Shock. I feel like somebody somewhere is going to be upset about that, but I've never played it.
I don't think
it's a big
game.
game.
I think that's honestly it. I have BioShock on Switch, and I just haven't played it. I just, moving on.
I know they're the same universe, but I think those are two totally different games as well.
Right, yeah, but I mean, it's the same kind of thing where it's like totally seems like a Dan game, just never went to it. Moving on to best arcade game. Lots of so much going on here. Okay, we've got Tekken in the arcade, Killer Instinct, Darkstalkers, Night Warriors, The King of Fighters 94, Ridge Racer, Alien vs. Predator, Windjammers, Top Hunter, Roddy and Kathy, and Cruisin' USA making an appearance. And we're going to start things off with John going with best arcade game.
And this is really tough.
Yeah.
Just because all the fighting games are pretty good. But then you have Cruisin' USA, which was like a really good arcade racer for the time. Like I used to, if I'm being honest with myself, I probably played more Cruisin' USA than any of these particular fighters. In arcade, I played a lot of Killer Instinct on Super Nintendo, but man, Cruisin' USA was so good. I'm probably, let's go Cruisin' USA for me.
All right.
Probably upset all the fighting game guys, but
yes,
you get the double arcade cabinets.
I'm the fighting game guy, and I only get to pick one, so
that's what I'm saying. I just basically eliminated myself out of having to choose between those. I'm a scapegoat.
Right. Adam.
I think I've got to go with Killer Instinct. My fighting game, I'm terrible at fighting games. I don't love the genre. But there were a handful that I did end up enjoying, and they're usually some that are slightly off the beaten path. I love Killer Instinct. I love Soul Calibur, stuff like that. Bloody Roar I got into a little bit. So I got to go with Killer Instinct. I have no idea what Top Hunter, Roddy, and Kathy is.
You should play it.
What is that? I have
my elevator pitch for it. If you ever wished Metal Slug was a beat 'em up, that's Top Hunter.
That's a pretty damn good elevator pitch, honestly, because I adore
it. I'm pretty sure it's the team that would make Metal Slug in like a year.
Wow, this key art, Sam,
aesthetically looks very Metal Slug.
Sam, this key art is not what I was expecting at all. The key art for this game does not look like what I was expecting.
No, gameplay, it's basically it's kind of beat 'em up ish.
Yeah,
it doesn't. You just hop between two planes. That was very SNK at the time too. That's what they did in Fatal Fury to make it like different from Street Fighter.
I mean, you got mechs, you got tanks.
You like punch stuff, yeah. You hop in tanks and stuff. It's yeah.
Shout out to Roddy and Jack.
It's not a fighting game.
No, it's a beat 'em up.
No, it's more like a run and punch, I guess.
Okay,
run and punch.
Sweet.
Yeah, because you can pick up guns, but your main attack is more close range.
It's like boxing gloves.
Well, I'll have to check that out, but my pick stands. I never got into Tekken. I never got into King of Fighters. I did play Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat quite a bit, but yeah, I got to go for the arcade experience and the uniqueness of the fighting game. I got to go with Killer Instinct.
Good news,
You did
everyone.
pick with the best announcer.
Yeah,
Good news, everyone. Neo Geo Top Hunter Roddy and Kathy is on Nintendo Switch for $8.
Yeah, there's an Arcade Archives.
Yeah.
I actually got it free. Amazon Games. For some reason, SNK just like threw a bunch of stuff onto
they
there. So that's one of those I got that way.
All right. And Shannon, your turn.
All right. So like Adam, I am not great at fighting games, and so I wasn't one to waste my quarters on them, just because I knew I wouldn't last very long. Until some of more of the Marvel versus Capcom and the X-Men arcade and those fighters got me to a little bit more.
X-Men Children of Adam is this year as well. I didn't list it here because I already listed like 4 fighting games.
Yeah, I see how it
You're
is.
allowed to vote for it.
Well, in '94, that's like what it became of arcades mostly. They just went to fighting games.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of throws it up in the air because I do really love that X-Men, but is it a better game than Killer Instinct? Probably not. So then but Cruisin' was my jam. I love that game. And so that's
that music.
No shame for cruising.
I know. I might have to give it to Cruisin', sitting in that double arcade, with another person, just jamming and driving and crashing, a lot of crashing. I'm going to give it to Cruisin'.
Oh, man. I feel like this category is going to make more people mad than any other category.
Because I realize legitimately, like in my head, I know that Killer Instinct is probably a better game.
Yeah.
Like from technical standpoint, from everything else. But when it just comes to fun and everything else, I'm going to go Cruisin'. So
we're talking the experience here. Like
yeah,
it all gets rolled into that. You just let it take you for.
Cruising USA was the quintessential 1994 experience in some respects. Sam.
A lot of fighting games, like we said. So this is definitely, everybody wants some of that Street Fighter money. After Street Fighter 2 kind of showed everybody how to do it. Mortal Kombat showed everybody that you can have more than one of these, making lots of money. Killer Instinct probably did the most to innovate in the genre. Because I mean, consider like in Street Fighter 2, combos were literally the original Street Fighter 2. Combos were literally a glitch, like it wasn't intended. By the time of Killer Instinct, they're like, "Hey, we have combo breakers, we have combo finishers. Like we are building around this as an actual mechanic now." I think in that sense, Killer Instinct deserves credit. In terms of impact, that and Tekken are huge. King of Fighters 94, I know, is huge. I don't have a lot of experience with King of Fighters or most SNK fighting games. If I'm going off of the game I really want to play the most right now, it's Darkstalkers. Maybe that's, me being too Capcom biased or something. I don't know. But like Darkstalkers, I love the characters. I love the design, the vibe of that game, where it's like creepy, but then you take a second look and it's actually just the goofiest thing in the world. I love it. And we need more Darkstalkers.
We do.
Solid. Yeah, shout out to Darkstalkers for having the most bananas roster of characters up to this point in a fighting game.
It's like all the classic monsters, man.
Yeah, it's great.
And in Night Warriors, that's the like versus screen actually just labeled them as like mummy, fishman, vampire. And they were definitely leaning into it a little more.
Love it. I'm not a fighting game guy. I was never good at them. This is not my genre. So I'll tell you right now, that's not where I'm gonna go. I do want to shout out Alien versus Predator. This is the beat 'em up, right?
Yeah.
This game, me and a buddy was playing on his main machine at his house, and we probably spent the most time of our entire evening playing through Alien versus Predator. Like the multiple different predators you can be, and all the different power ups you get, and the weapons, and it is sort of like it's sort of like the end conclusion of like everything a beat 'em up was. The characters on screen are huge. The bosses are ginormous. Everything's larger than life. The explosions take up the entire screen. It's an action movie in a beat 'em up video game, and it's very, very well done. So huge shout out to Alien versus Predator. And Cruising USA, like that's a thing, man. It's like, oh man, I'm really bad at fighting games. What am I gonna do? Oh, pretty girls. Let's go play Cruising USA. And it's always fun. Even when you suck, it's fun. So that's why Cruising USA is good. I think I am going to give it to Alien versus Predator just because that's my personal choice. And Cruising USA is going to win anyway. But yeah, shout out to Cruising USA. But my vote goes to Alien versus Predator. And with all the votes cast, the best arcade game of 1994 is Cruising USA.
We just swung it over.
That's just
The fighting game vote was too split. That's the problem.
It was, yeah.
If I had ever played Darkstalkers, I have trouble voting for a game that I've never played before.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all right. So
check out the Capcom Fighting Collection Volume 1.
Yeah, I might have to do that.
some good stuff. So that concludes our console-specific awards for the show. We're going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do best soundtrack, best multiplayer, most innovative, all kinds of cool awards coming up. So don't go too far. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking about best soundtrack here on GOTY 30. Games that had soundtracks that are memorable, that you remember. That's what we're going to do. And our first game on our list is Mega Man X. Then we have Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy 3, Streets of Rage 3, and Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer wasn't on the arcade list, was it?
Yes,
It was. Nobody
just ignored it for Cruising USA.
Why is Ridge Racer on the best soundtrack nomination?
I'm sure Sam will tell us.
I've heard people have a fondness for Ridge Racer. Being said, I don't know. Arcade games, I think, are tricky to put for this because in an arcade, you can't always hear things very well. Because there's a lot of noises coming from all the neighboring machines.
Well, you could hear the Cruising USA soundtrack because it had like huge speakers coming out of it.
You could hear it across the room.
Yeah, you were like in a car.
Adam, you're going to kick us off for best soundtrack.
Well, I'm surprised that Super Metroid isn't on here, which has an iconic soundtrack.
It probably should be.
Yeah,
the list is not binding. If you want to vote for Super Metroid, vote for Super Metroid.
You could do a ride-in, man.
Here's the thing. The Super Metroid soundtrack deserves to be nominated.
Consider it nominated.
The Mega Man X soundtrack is incredible. The Final Fantasy 3 soundtrack is incredible. But here's the thing. If someone put a gun to my head and was like, here's a keyboard, play as much of a game soundtrack as you possibly can, I would have to go with Donkey Kong Country. It's one of the best 16-bit soundtracks of all time. It's absolutely iconic. Just pushing that hardware to its absolute limit. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only person talking about it, so I'll try to keep it brief. But as much as I played I probably have more hours in Final Fantasy III than any of these games. But I, for the life of me, other than the victory fanfare, couldn't hum a tune of any of them. They're just not, for whatever reason, all that memorable for me. Same goes for Mega Man X. Like, great music. When I'm playing it, I'm absolutely jamming. Like, this is incredible. But as far as memorability, Donkey Kong Country is the catchiest. I think it pushes the limits of what the hardware is capable of. And I think it's the best. I think it's the best music out of all of this. I just wanted to mention that the Super Metroid soundtrack is also incredible. But I still think DKC takes it.
Let's go.
Shout out to David Weiss.
Shout out to David Weiss. Yeah. All right. You heard it here first, folks. Shannon, your turn, dude.
So the thing with the Super Metroid, I think it absolutely has to be here. And if we were just talking about like atmospheric music, I'd probably give it to Metroid. I mean, the sound effects and everything else, it's incredible.
Yeah, overall sound design, like not just the music, I'd have to give it to Super Metroid.
Agreed 100%. Outside of that, though, yeah, I mean, this is very tough for me. Because it really comes down to, and Mega Man X has got incredible music too. It really does. But this comes down to Donkey Kong Country and Final Fantasy III for me. I spent so much time in Final Fantasy III that I do know all those. I do love putting on that soundtrack just when I'm having to focus on something. But there's a reason why Donkey Kong Country games are probably the ones I play the most in the new Nintendo Music app. I play a lot of Donkey Kong Country, and that's because they're catchy, they're upbeat. I mean it's living rent free in my head right now as we speak. So I'm gonna have to go with Donkey Kong Country. Yeah, that's hard. It's hard, but yep. I feel good about it.
Alrighty. Sam, best soundtrack.
Yeah, it says a lot that pretty much all our front runners for best Super Nintendo also pretty much automatically got nominated for best soundtrack.
Right.
It's just how fire this year was for the Super Nintendo. These games were just the total package. I obviously knew Mega Man X was going on here when I knew it was out this year. Like, I knew that would be in multiple categories. It's an iconic sound, and I will give it credit too for really setting the stage for each stage in a way that's kind of underappreciated. Like, obviously most of the soundtrack's very high energy, very kind of upbeat, but like Chill Penguin's stage has a nice wintry sound to it. Launch Octopus's stage has that like bass line to kind of drive home like you're in the deep ocean. You know, we got all this kind of like boom, 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 boom. But I think in terms of what, just the variety, the extent of music, I think actually goes to Final Fantasy III. Donkey Kong Country might have maybe like the best individual like track or best individual riffs. Definitely the catchiest. But Final Fantasy III has an opera in it.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy III, the final stage boss, that track is over 17 minutes long. It is composed of multiple movements. Like, that composer wrote an opera for the Super Nintendo. I don't know what can compete with that.
That's why it was hard. That's what I'm saying. That's not an easy choice.
All right, Sam voting for Final Fantasy 3. And good. My vote.
Yeah, I guess I should mention Streets of Rage 3.
Yeah, go for it.
On there.
Yeah.
But as in soundtrack, so as in gameplay, so in the soundtrack, I think Streets of Rage 2 is better. But Yuzo Koshiro is still the only person I trust to make the Genesis sound good.
I could have replaced Streets of Rage 3 there with Sonic 3. I think Sonic 3 soundtrack.
I was going to mention, I think Sonic 3 deserves to at least be mentioned.
Sure.
And, you know,
Or Sonic.
Sega fans
either one.
might disagree with me, but I think it's pretty, I would say it's objective that the Super Nintendo audio hardware is superior in every single way to the Genesis, audio hardware. But the Sonic 3 soundtrack is just, it deserves to be mentioned at least. It's really good. There's that speculation with comparison to a number of there's speculation that Michael Jackson was involved somehow. It's never been confirmed, but there's so many similarities that it's hard to ignore. But either way, whether it was just a fluke or whether, the composers were simply trying to emulate a lot of his music, it at least deserves to be mentioned. It's I would argue is probably the best soundtrack on the Genesis, which I get it. That's not saying that much, but the Genesis fans are going to come at me with pitchforks and torches, but it may be one of the very few Genesis soundtracks worth mentioning.
Yeah, for sure. It certainly rivals Sonic 2, if not surpasses it. I really, really enjoyed that soundtrack as well. And then another thing that I want to say, I'm obviously voting for Donkey Kong Country, but Super Metroid, it's, I'm not even gonna, whatever. Super Metroid, didn't almost all of the iconic Metroid themes that we have now from like Metroid Prime and onward come from Super Metroid? Am I remembering that correctly? Or were a lot of them already in place from...
There was quite a few of them in the original Metroid.
Okay.
Yeah, they're kind of hard to recognize on the NES, but I think most of them were iterations.
Sure.
And, expounded upon from the...
But they're iconic. Yeah, they're iconic nonetheless.
There.
For sure. They're iconic nonetheless. And you're right.
Metroid made them sound better.
Well, for sure, yeah, and almost all of those themes made it over to Metroid Prime. So we talk about longevity and how iconic that soundtrack is. And yeah, so again, just to bounce off of what Adam was saying about Donkey Kong Country, David Weiss sort of creating a soundscape for this jungle theme. Creating things that hadn't been heard on a Super Nintendo yet, instruments and like synth waves and things that we didn't even know were possible. And there's whole YouTube videos that go through like how he pulled it off, and just the painstaking code by line by line coding he did of each song. So Donkey Kong Country for me. And John takes the final vote.
At this point, I take the doesn't matter vote. I think that, well, I mean, we already kind of mentioned Sonic is definitely deserving of being on here, but I definitely don't, even if it was on here, I don't think I would vote for it because it doesn't even have as good a soundtrack as like something like Gunstar Heroes. So
that's true.
As far as like Sega goes. So, but I think as much as I love Donkey Kong Country and it is a great soundtrack and it's probably one I listen to more often than any of the rest of these. Super Metroid's good, but when you take Super Metroid's soundtrack outside of Super Metroid, it's not as enjoyable to listen to without playing the game.
True.
But again, that's also like I don't want to take away from what it is. But I also have the same kind of problem with Donkey Kong Country. I think I actually enjoy the soundtrack more than I do playing the game. Not saying it's a bad game, but it's a fun soundtrack. But I think the Final Fantasy III does like a really good job of having the soundtrack go along with everything. I can listen to it outside of the game. I like it in the game. Everything sounds like it's fun.
I'm a sucker for leitmotifs too.
Yeah.
So that part during the credits too, where Locke and Celis's theme play together and it like syncs up perfectly is just like, oh wow. Didn't even realize that.
Oh,
like
right.
What's the name of the song? Is it Aquatic from Donkey Kong Country?
Aquatic Ambiance?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably like one of the greatest Super Nintendo soundtrack pieces ever made. Like I could sit and listen to that. I have like an acoustic version of it on there that I listen to too.
Probably second only to like something like Sticker Brush Symphony, which is DKC2, but
yeah. I think I enjoy it more than that. I think that's my favorite Donkey Kong Country song. But,
solid choice.
But no, I got to go Final Fantasy 3 as well. I think it just overall has a more broad sound and it fits the game really well.
All right. So by one vote, Donkey Kong Country takes it over Final Fantasy 3. But this could have gone either way so easily. I think both of these games, in totally different ways, sort of showcase the range of the Super Nintendo as far as like soundtracks go. So yeah, congrats to Donkey Kong Country. Woo! Moving on to best multiplayer. Alrighty. Okay. Well, Sam, at the end here it just says arcade fighting games. Did you?
Yeah, I didn't have to pick one. But I mean, obviously,
them all in.
we noticed how many fighting games were in. So if anybody has a favorite fighting game,
I'll write it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll start out with The Great Circus Mystery, starring Mickey Mouse and Minnie, Super Bomberman 2, Mega Bomberman, Streets of Rage 3, Lost Vikings, and various arcade fighting game of your choice.
So I will note, I am calling out the Genesis version specifically for Lost Vikings there, because I believe that is the one that actually allowed simultaneous multiplayer. The Super Nintendo one did not.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
And then Mega Bomberman is omitted.
Mega Bomberman, sorry. All right. I promise we look at these lists before we get here. Sometimes things
next year.
What are you going to do? Sam did the heavy lifting on these lists. Thank you, Sam. Okay. Yeah. So starting us off is Shannon, I believe, is jumping in first.
So I think it's my turn. Whew. I just want to give a very quick shout out to Final Fantasy III here, because believe it or not, you could actually play multiplayer. Yeah. I can't say that it deserves the award because that person only gets to fight. Like they don't get to actually control the character anywhere else outside of battles, and it's also turn-based, so they're not even doing anything action. It's literally just selecting. But I did make my my best friend Matt play second player on that game a lot. So I'm sorry, Matt. Anyway,
shout out to Matt.
That's right. If I have to do it here, I'm going to go with arcade fighting games, and I'm going to mention specifically Children of the Atom, X-Men Children of the Atom. Because that's, of these games, that's the one I would have played. I did play a little bit of Super Bomberman 2. And I have Great Circus Mystery. I do not think that I've ever played multiplayer with it, though. So maybe I might have to try that. But I do remember playing a lot of X-Men Children of the Atom multiplayer and having a good time. Just beating up each other is our favorite X-Men.
All right, sweet. Sam, your vote.
Ooh. I also enjoy X-Men Children of the Atom. I've had a chance to play it on the recent Marvel collection, Marvel vs. Capcom collection. But I'm gonna pretty much go on nostalgia here, and go with Great Circus Mystery, starring Mickey and Minnie. This is a game I remember playing with my brothers as a kid. One of the reasons it does stand out is because it was a game that we could actually play all the way through as kids. Which a lot of those, that was not, we could not beat Joe and Mac. We could beat Great Circus Mystery. And this is a game that it's a platformer that allows for simultaneous play. So Joe and Mac is really the main one I'd compare it to at the same time. Because like in Donkey Kong Country, like you're just taking turns.
Yeah. Okay. It's Mario.
In Mario World, you're just taking turns. There weren't that many games that let you do this. Especially if you exempt, like, we didn't get the other Gomon games or things like that.
And there's Chip and
really fun game.
Yeah,
overall.
did it.
Yeah.
On the NES.
The first Magical Quest game, because this is also technically Disney's Magical Quest 2. The first one doesn't have multiplayer. I played that after having grown up with Magical Quest 2, Great Circus Mystery. And I was like super disappointed that it didn't have a multiplayer mode. You just play as Mickey. But yeah, you get different costumes basically that are like different powers. Like there's a vacuum. There's a explorer outfit that gives you a grappling hook. It's just fun, and you can switch between those. Now you can both pretty much switch between all the ones you have unlocked as you progress through the game. At any time. I will say, like, Lost Vikings does something a little bit more where each character has like unique abilities.
Yep.
That is something I appreciate from a co-op perspective, where you actually have like, oh, let me do this thing because I'm the character that can do this better. When you do that, like letting people specialize where they both get to kind of pull their own weight in unique ways. I always appreciate that. But ultimately, I just mostly based on I grew up with this game and my memories of it are based on the multiplayer. I go with Great Circus Mystery.
Cool. Is that a Super Nintendo game?
Yep.
All right. I want to check that one out.
Give it a try.
Yeah.
See if I can get one of my kids.
There is a third game that we didn't get in the US, where they replaced Minnie with Donald, but actually made Mickey and Donald have different abilities.
That's cool.
In each power up. And it did get ported to the Game Boy Advance and got a release.
All right, great. I don't know that I have a dog in this fight, really. Like, I've played a little Lost Vikings. I don't have any arcade chops here. Unless I could go Alien versus Predator again, because that was multiplayer. Since we're talking about arcade. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to sit this one out. I don't feel equipped to give an answer on this one. So, John, go ahead and say your vote there.
I've got to go Super Bomberman 2 here. This is like the quintessential multiplayer game. I think Super Bomberman wins like every year that it's in here for me. This one, even like when they released this game, you could also buy the multi-tap. Like, this is what gave us the multi-tap for the Super Nintendo. So you could actually play Bomberman with 4 players, which is the correct way to play Bomberman.
I thought the correct way was with 10 players on the Saturn.
No, that's like later. Yeah. With the Saturn, you have to have 2 multi-taps to do that. So, yeah, no, Super Bomberman 2. I could do arcade fighting games, but none of them are as much fun multiplayer as Super Bomberman 2 for me.
All right. John, Super Bomberman 2. And then Adam, your vote.
I'm going to throw a curveball. And we haven't mentioned it up to this point, but I think this category deserves a write-in. And anyone that knows me knows that I'm very much not much of a sports fan. However, something that we have neglected to mention
NHL 94.
close.
That's last year. It came out in 93.
Yeah, it came out in 93. I want to talk about NBA Jam Tournament Edition for a sec. If you have not played NBA Jam with a bunch of friends, it's absolutely bonkers. It's almost like, I don't know. It's hard to describe if you've never played it. It's almost like the basketball version of Super Smash Brothers. The console version was multi-tap compatible. You could play 4 players on the Super Nintendo. It was just an absolutely wild version of 2-on-2 basketball. Believe the arcade was 4 players natively, of course, but and me and my friends played so much NBA Jam. It was, and I didn't like sports games. NBA Jam was off the wall. You could, there were so many unlockables. You could play as Bill Clinton. Like, it was absolutely unhinged. You get a streak going and you're literally on fire and you're just, slamming, you're jumping, just ridiculous heights in the air and lighting the net on fire with your streak. It's just wild fun. Fighting games, the arcade fighting games is where friends became enemies. And I feel like NBA Jam was where enemies became friends. So my vote goes to NBA Jam Tournament Edition. And I think Dan needs to vote.
Yeah, I have a tiebreaker.
I think I forgot about Tournament Edition. I think we talked a lot about NBA Jam last year with the original.
Yeah, NBA Jam 93 Tournament Edition added a lot more to it.
Yeah.
And including, I might have to Google it, but I don't think the original NBA Jam was multi-tap compatible.
I don't know, because I don't think there was the multi-tap yet.
That makes sense.
Right. So I'm pushing hard for NBA Jam Tournament Edition.
No, that's fair. And, it's not in running for best Super Nintendo or Genesis game because we talked about NBA Jam last year. But this is totally fair to put it in this category. Especially you feel strongly about it, and I appreciate that. I have to pick a best multiplayer game. I haven't played almost any of these, and so by virtue of just being the quintessential multiplayer game that anybody can pick up, we're going to go Bomberman 2 here. Super Bomberman 2 is my vote.
Man award.
Gotta give it.
I might actually throw another wrench into this then, because I might actually switch to NBA Jam.
Oh, shoot.
I didn't really realize that this was that year, and my brother and I played a lot of that. My friends and I played a lot of it. So I'm actually going to change over to NBA Jam.
All right. Shannon with the switch up and making things more complicated. Sam.
So now I have to pick between those two.
Sam's the tiebreaker between Super Bomberman 2 and NBA Jam.
I feel kind of bad for not including NBA Jam. I think it is. Yeah, that's definitely that's on me for not putting it on the list.
Well, I didn't realize it either.
It made it though.
Yeah, well, because I remembered it was on last, but yeah, Tournament Edition.
Somebody added it to.
I guess that's significant.
Community award.
Yeah,
who added?
You got to write in on community vote.
Eric Plunk. Shout out to Eric Plunk for adding it to the community award list.
Hell yeah, Eric.
That said, if you're just going to ask me right now, hey, let's play something. Do you want to play NBA Jam or Super Bomberman 2? It's going to be Bomberman.
All right.
And honestly, if I didn't take the liberty of adding a write-in, it would have gone to Super Bomberman myself. But
Super
I'm glad we
Bomberman
got to
solid
talk about
choice.
NBA Jam Tournament Edition.
Yeah, NBA Jam.
This Super Bomberman added the deal where whenever you die, you get the little robot.
Yeah, that's a staple.
Cruises around the arena.
Yes.
That didn't happen.
Revenge kills.
Yep.
And honestly, if we didn't get Super Bomberman 2, we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to play Tournament Edition 4-player on the Super Nintendo.
That's right.
There you go. All right. So, Best Multiplayer Game of 1994 award goes to Super Bomberman 2, a very close second to NBA Jam Tournament Edition, with a shout out
I tried, Eric.
to X-Man Children of the Atom. Eric appreciates it. I feel the appreciation. Okay.
And Great Circus Mystery.
And shout out to Great Circus.
For Sam.
True. And actually, I'm going to leave Sam there. Okay. Most innovative is our next category. Not our last. Got quite a few left. Most innovative is a game that was very innovative. So let's tell the nominations. We've got Stunt Race FX, XCOM UFO Defense, System Shock, Final Fantasy III, and Blackthorn. And starting us off this time is Sam, I think. No, you kicked it off last time.
This is a category I kind of expect write-ins because people have different rubrics they might be using for innovative.
Sure.
I thought it was a good time to shout out Stunt Race FX because I don't think that's getting any awards for gameplay per se.
It was a great.
But it really is. It is a really good showcase of what a Super Nintendo could do, graphically speaking. So, granted, the frame rate suffers because of that in some cases. So I mean, you can take innovative to be in terms of technical aspects, whether that be graphics, gameplay innovation, pushing forward the boundaries of stories and things. That's kind of why Final Fantasy III is on here. But I would ask people to, focus just on innovation, not like which of these games is the best game. The awards for what's the most innovative. My thought actually does lean towards XCOM UFO Defense. A lot of the reasons I voted it for Best PC, I just don't know many other games like it. And it did it so long ago and did it so well to the point where Enemy Unknown comes out in 2012 and reminds people that you can make games like this and basically kicked off a tactics game renaissance just by being pretty much an update of that game. So that's what gets my vote.
All right. Which game was it? I'm sorry.
XCOM.
All right, sweet. My vote here, this is a little interesting because I don't have a lot of experience with these. I wrote in Blackthorn because I thought it was a really cool, kind of interesting take on the like story-driven platformer on the Super Nintendo. And man, I kind of want to write in Uniracers. It's over here on the Weird Award, but like, I guess it wasn't doing anything too innovative. It was just sort of threw some interesting ideas at you. Although, no, you know what? I'm going to bring it over. I'm going to bring Uniracers over from Outstanding Weirdness over to innovative.
It can be in both.
Yeah. It can be in both. I don't feel like it's going to win weirdness because there's way weirder stuff going on here. Uniracers is just unicycles racing. The reason I bring it over is not necessarily the fact that it's like a 2D scrolling racing game with unicycles. It is it uses a lot of pre-rendered graphics. And the combo system in Uniracers is something that we don't really see a lot of in these kinds of games. It's almost like Tony Hawk took a lot of cues from Uniracers because there are multiple different flips you can do. There's extra points for doing things faster, for getting more flips in the air, for the kinds of flips you do, if you do a corkscrew or if you do like an alley-oop. And then you can combine them to do different things. So like your L and R, your X and Y, like flip you in different ways, as well as having just like a jump button. So I think Uniracers, for its combo system and allowing the combo system to sort of add to your speed, making it sort of like a risk reward type system where if you're racing somebody, the more tricks you do, the faster you go. But if you F up, like, you're going to be behind. So, I played the crap out of Uniracers back in the day, and it was such a unique experience. So I'm going to go with Uniracers on this one for the combo system almost exclusively.
Now you've made me want a unicycle mode in Tony Hawk.
That's a great idea, actually. Yeah. And then John's up next for most innovative.
Oh gosh. I think I will go Stunt Race FX because I don't think it's going to get another chance anywhere else. No. And as poorly as this game runs, it's still very unique, and it, kind of did something that wasn't being done on the Super Nintendo.
It has really Easter eggs.
It does.
Yeah.
And like, this isn't in 94, it's kind of a hard year for innovation to me. There's a lot of sequels.
Big time.
We didn't have any new consoles that were just doing crazy things yet.
We did have Uniracers.
I think last year, didn't we give? I think it went to Virtual Fighter or something like something. 3D polygonal fighting game.
I feel like in this time period, you're going to see more of the innovation happen in the arcades and the PC games. I actually did almost put Warcraft on here. If anybody wants to vote for it, that's fine. But I did a little bit of research, and because it is one of the earlier RTS games.
Yep.
But Dune 2 did kind of set the ground for it beforehand.
Yeah, I think I'll still stick with Stunt Race.
I said this earlier as a joke, but it honestly is. Stunt Race FX is a great rental because it's easy to pick up and play, visually really fun, like eyeballs on your cars. It's hilarious. And it is playable. It's not like a total S show, right? It's serviceable, but it kind of runs its course really quickly. Once you know what you're doing, it's like, okay, this is what it is. So there's not a lot of meat there, but for what they were doing, yeah, solid game, great rental. I back you up, John, even though I'm not voting for it. Adam, most innovative.
This is tough. I'm not going to write in and vote for it, but I think Sonic & Knuckles deserves to be mentioned again here with the,
snap-on technology.
Interchangeable. Yeah, or what is that what they called it?
I think they did.
That was, the literal definition of innovative, being able to basically mix and mash your cartridges together to have different gameplay experiences. That's pretty innovative from a hardware standpoint. And how did they even make that happen from a software standpoint? That's kind of mind-blowing. That's really the only one that I can think of that is kind of truly innovative. Most of these, admittedly and somewhat embarrassingly, I have not played XCOM. So I have a problem voting for something I haven't played. Stunt Race FX, it's kind of it's pretty cool to have a fully realized 3D game on something like the Super Nintendo this early. But we had fully 3D games on PC prior to this. In 94, I was playing games like Marathon, which is the precursor to Halo. So it's okay, it's cool that the Super Nintendo with the hardware that was inside of it was able to pull it off, but it's not particularly innovative in my mind. So this is a tough category for me. Uniracers is really unique from a gameplay standpoint. I'm not sure how innovative it is necessarily. It was really fun. But man, actually, you know what? The more I think about it, and if we're just talking about pure like gameplay, at least with the games that I've played here, it's hard not to vote for Uniracers. Actually,
That's right.
I could be swayed.
You know what to vote for.
I do because I feel like I'm rambling because I don't.
Yeah, that was a bad pun. That was bad.
Well, if Marathon came out in 94, you could write it in.
I think it did, but I mean, there's nothing particularly innovative necessarily about Marathon. It's just a really good first-person shooter that took what Doom did and, you know, ran with it in a more futuristic kind of setting on the Mac. I mean, darn, I got to give it to Uniracers. I can't really think of anything. I mean, I could be a jerk and just write in Sonic and Knuckles.
That's not a jerk move.
Let's do that.
That's your move. Yeah. I like
because honestly, like, think about it. Like, I know the gameplay itself is not innovative at all, right? But like, okay, think about, just imagine like Super Mario World, but you can flip up the top and plug in. Okay, that's a bad example because they're different. I was going to say plug in Super Mario 3, but like imagine taking a Mario game like Mario 3 or whatever, and then plugging in Super Mario Brothers 2 into the Super Mario Brothers 3 cartridge and go back and play through Super Mario Brothers 2 levels as Tanuki Mario or Raccoon Mario. You know what I mean? It's like if Nintendo had done that, people would have lost their minds. So from a hardware, like putting two cartridges together to create a completely new gameplay experience, like I almost hate to, you know, give it to Sega on this, on a game franchise that I have zero feelings about anymore. But as far as innovation goes, I got to give it to Sonic and Knuckles.
I think Sega just likes stacking stuff.
I think so.
They want to be the tallest.
If you owned a Genesis,
my console's taller than
it was
1994.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, and then you could do other stuff too. Like it wasn't just Sonic 2 that you could, or 3 that you could plug into it. You could like plug in any Genesis game and get like a unique bonus level. It was crazy.
All right. Adam, right in with Sonic and Knuckles. I don't disagree with you. Cool stuff. But we do have Shannon, who is either going to choose a winner or totally tie everything up.
Ooh. Yeah, to be honest, I don't have as much experience with some of these games as you guys do either. You know, Final Fantasy III, to me, it's more of a perfection of everything that came before. Where it is innovative, I suppose, is the music and the story. But again, is that really perfecting things? Or is that something that you would see emulated after?
Well, so how much of the future of Final Fantasy was determined or guided by Final Fantasy III specifically?
And we may never actually know because Nintendo
kind of
screwed over Sony, and the rest is history, right?
Yeah, but how much of Final Fantasy VII borrows from 3, I guess, is my question.
Not a whole lot. I mean, more. It started leaning more steampunk after 6. You can say. I mean, there was some of that.
I mean, what's most maybe innovative about Final Fantasy III from a story perspective is that it really switches focus between characters.
Yes, and every character gets.
I don't know any other RPG at the time really did much of.
And the only other one I can think of is Chrono Trigger. I feel like it's which comes after this. So
Yep.
I may just have to create a bigger tie and give it to Final Fantasy 3.
We always have
because
a community.
I feel like music and story, it deserves it for both of those.
All right. Well, the community has quite a feat in front of them because they are going to have to break a 5-way tie between these games, unless anybody wants to concede. Adam has his finger up.
Well, so I looked up the literal definition of innovate, which simply just means to introduce changes and new ideas. And so I was being a lot more focused on introducing novel ideas. And I think Sonic and Knuckles is a novelty. And
They didn't do it again.
As far as introducing changes and new ideas, in terms of the gameplay goes, right? Because ultimately these are games and we play them, and so the innovation should be in the gameplay, right? So unfortunately, I'm sorry, Sam, having not played XCOM, I am changing my write-in vote for hardware novelty and changing it to a game which introduces changes and new ideas in gameplay and the branching storylines. I'm going to give it to Final Fantasy 3.
All right.
I am curious to see what the community thinks of this one, though.
Let's still do a vote then. Why not?
Yeah, because there's so many different, I think people have their own definitions of what it means to innovate. And then even then, it's like, okay, what innovations are worthwhile and what innovations are just, like I said, novelty.
I will say the only reason Uniracers didn't get a sequel is because DMA Design was sued by Pixar because of the likeness of one of Pixar's early animated movies was a unicycle dancing around, and they apparently own the rights to the image of a unicycle. So they stopped printing cartridges after the first run because they got sued. So we could be playing Uniracer 64. We could be playing Uniracers on Switch right now, but because of Pixar and their greedy.
In that case, Nintendo should have sued Pixar for copying Stunt Race effects.
Snap.
Yep.
Cars with eyes, you say? Well,
We've already done this.
yeah. All right. That's awesome. Well, we'll throw up a community vote later on to see what you guys think about most innovative. And we will move on to our next award, probably one of my favorite awards, the Plock Award for Outstanding Weirdness. Now, this is a game that quality has no bearing here. This is simply how weird can we get? How far can we push the envelope to make things as weird as possible? And I will go ahead and read the nominations. We have Earthworm Jim, The Twisted Tale of Spike McFang, Dynamite Headdy, Robotrek, Biker Mice from Mars, Mega Man Soccer, Clay Fighter, and Stop That Roach. Gentlemen, we're going to start with John here, because I think I kind of messed the order up a little bit, so we're going to get back on track. Starting with John. John, which of these games is the weirdest?
Man, this is another tough one.
It's a tough year for weirdness.
I mean, it's a good year for weirdness.
Yeah, the easy ones to pick out
Right.
are like Earthworm Jim or Clay Fighter, because they're both very weird, like aesthetically. But then you have stuff like Stop That Roach and
Oh man, Stop That
Dynamite
Roach is so good.
is very like weird gameplay wise.
Stop That Roach. For the uninitiated, Stop That Roach is a Game Boy game. It's a tactics Game Boy game, except instead of like knights in armor or robots, you're a guy chasing roaches around a kitchen. And, you take your turn and you make your move and then you stomp on a roach. And there's 2 more in the corners. You got to go over and stomp more. It's roach tactics. I rest my case.
I am not even initiated with the Twisted Tale of Spike McFang.
Yeah, I'd love to play it, but unfortunately, it's like super rare and valuable.
Super Nintendo?
From what I know, it's a pretty good game too. But yeah, you
Super
play as
Nintendo.
a kid vampire who eats tomatoes instead of blood, and yeah,
It's like an RPG.
yeah, like action RPG, I think.
Yeah.
I think though they're gonna have to go with Earthworm Jim. Just because it's like probably the weirdest game on this list. With the just the whole thing is outrageous.
I was having a conversation with Moses, with a well-read mage, about how the enemy design in Earthworm Jim is just so good. Like,
Well, it's like a 80s cartoon.
yeah,
Like Saturday morning cartoon.
but just taken to the most extreme, weird Professor Monkey for a head. Like, let's just go. Come on.
Yep. It reminds me a lot of like Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, hell yeah.
Like the same kind of humor and everything. So yeah, it's definitely out there.
Very 90s.
Yes.
All right. Adam, your vote for Plock Award for Outstanding Weirdness.
Man, I used to love Earthworm Jim, and the character designs and the humor and the music stand out. But man, going back and playing Earthworm Jim is not fun.
Keep in mind, quality has no bearing on this award whatsoever.
Well, in the past, we have said it's a combination of quality and weirdness.
Have we? Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Because Plock is very playable.
Yes.
I am giving the nod to Dynamite Headdy. Har har.
Yo, let's go. All right. Dynamite Headdy. Definitely weird in both gameplay mechanic and in presentation.
But super fun and very
Super fun. Treasure, a treasure in more than one way. All right. Shannon, your vote for Outstanding Weirdness Plock Award.
Yeah, I think you can't get much more Plock-like than Dynamite Headdy, where you are literally taking parts of your body and throwing them around.
There we go.
Dynamite Headdy was a nice first. Dynamite Headdy, I just played that for the first time not that long ago when we did it as a retro rewind game. And I had to use rewind, but I did make it to the end of the game.
It's tough.
And it's very difficult, but it is so bizarre. I mean, you'll be doing stuff and you're like, it's like you're in Hollywood and you're making a film, like you're on film sets and stuff. And then all of a sudden you're fighting a giant baby head because I don't know why, but you are. And so I'm gonna give it to Dynamite Headdy here. Earthworm Jim is absolutely weird, but I think Dynamite Headdy takes it up a notch.
Right on.
Yeah, I think Dan hit it on the head when he said Dynamite Headdy is weird, gameplay wise, not just aesthetically. I think Earthworm Jim is very weird aesthetically, but it's especially the first Jim. There are some stages that shake things up. I think if this was Earthworm Jim 2, it would be another story.
Yeah.
If only just for the Villy people level, where you're Jim as just a worm floating around inside the suit and there's pinball bumpers everywhere, and then you reach the end and he unzips it and it's Jim in his suit inside a suit of an earthworm, like and the cows and everything. Like, I think Earthworm Jim 2 could take it over Dynamite Headdy, but I don't think Earthworm Jim 1 does.
Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out to Robotrek. If you're wondering why that's on here and you've never played it, what might help clue you in is the original Japanese name of that game is Slapstick. It does a lot of like riffing on RPG cliches and things. Like if you start up the game, like one of the whole things is you actually have to ring people's doorbells to enter their house because you can't just enter people's houses unannounced. It's a fun game, but I don't think it's anywhere near as weird as some of these others. Dynamite Headdy, all the way.
All right.
Let's go.
3 for Dynamite Headdy. I don't have a tiebreaker here or anything. I shout out to Mega Man Soccer. Not a weird game, but like this is pre Mario Sports era. Like this isn't like, oh, Mario did it, let's make a Mega Man Soccer game. This is like, why did we, what, why, who pitched this, and they like pushed it through, made an entire video.
Mega Man was on fire, dude.
I guess so.
Enough Mega Man games.
Yeah, shoot, man. Like, why not? I also just have a soft spot.
We had Mario characters driving go-karts. Why not?
That's true. I just have a soft spot for Stop That Roach.
I've never played it. I need to check it out.
It's so dumb. I'm glad Bikermeister Mars is on here because it's another one of those bizarre like Ninja Turtle likes, you know, like Sewer Sharks or Battletoads.
It's actually a really good game.
Yeah,
right. It's not like a weird game. It's just, you know,
true. I'm just glad it's on.
TMNT like.
As far as Earthworm Jim goes for me, I think the weird factor, like the pure weird factor, Earthworm Jim would take it. Just the characters and what each level is and what the bosses are and every level being a totally different like aesthetic of some weird bizarro thing, and you're meeting all these enemies that don't make any sense. It's you know, it's the final conclusion of 90s gross out humor nightmare fuel. So like pure weirdness, I'm going to give it to Earthworm Jim, but I'm not going to give it to Earthworm Jim because Dynamite Headdy is by far most playable, best gameplay, weirdest gameplay. It should be like it's an innovative. Oh, it's not an innovative. It should have been an innovative too because it introduced a bunch of cool ideas as far as like you're throwing your head and all these like, you know, how many upgrades are there in this game? 15 or 20 head upgrades or something like that.
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah. So Dynamite Headdy, got to give it to Treasure on that one. And the winner is Dynamite Headdy. Let's go. Yeah. So glad we have that award. Okay, we are coming down to the last 2 awards. Before we get to Game of the Year, we're going to do Underdog and then Community Game of the Year. So we have a couple things to do before we get there, and I am just adjusting things to make it make more sense for me. So, Underdog Game of the Year. Games that we love, but don't quite deserve a spot on like best of lists, maybe. And here we go. Mega Turrican, Twisted Tale of Spike McFang, Dragon View, X-Men Children of the Atom, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, Contra Hardcore, Claymates, Breath of Fire, Demon's Crest, Lemmings 2 Tribes, and Skitchin.
Din, 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 din.
Yes, so good. All right. Adam is going to kick us off with Underdog Game of the Year.
The true underdog of not just this list of video games that came out in 1994, but the underdog of the entire animal kingdom is the humble lemming. The game that maybe other than Mario Paint did the most to utilize the Super Nintendo mouse peripheral to greatest effect.
True. Too true.
Is Lemmings 2 Tribes. Oh, sorry, The Tribes.
The Tribes. Yeah.
Lemmings 2 The Tribe.
I've been saying it wrong my whole life. All right, Lemmings 2
You've been
Tribes.
saying the name of Donkey Kong Country 2 wrong up until like 2 years ago.
Diddy's Kong's Quest. Yeah. Yes, yes. Shannon, Underdog.
I think for me, I'd want to say, I've already talked a lot about what Children of the Atom, X-Men Children of the Atom means to me. Like, I do have a lot of fond memories of that. But ultimately, I don't know that that is necessarily the underdog that I would go with. But I'm not going to go too far from it. I think I might have to go with X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. Up until this point, if you play a lot of X-Men games, it should be a no-brainer, right? Like, to do a nice beat 'em up. But a lot of them are not very good. They're just not great. And don't even get me started on this Spider-Man, X-Men,
Arcade's Revenge.
Revenge. Like, that is just, I don't know how they could screw that up so bad.
It's got a Tim Follin soundtrack, though.
That's true. The soundtrack is very good. But with Mutant Apocalypse, I feel like they finally got something going that is playable, that's actually fun. So for that reason, I'm going to go with that. But Lemmings 2, man, I didn't really play that at the time, and it's always been something I wish I had dabbled in more. But yeah, I'm going to go with the X-Men.
All right.
I appreciate the Mutant Apocalypse love. I do like that game a lot. I think it would be a fantastic game if the second half of the game was as good as the first half.
Yeah.
That's always been my problem with it. The first 5 stages that are designed around the 5 characters you play them as are great. The stages after that feel like they ran out of time to finish them, to the point where 2 or 3 of them in a row, I think, are just bosses, and they're just really annoying bosses. And they don't even have any justifiable plot reason. In the middle of Magneto holding the world hostage, Professor X is like, "Hey, go to the danger room and fight this simulation of Tusk." And it's like, what? Why? Why are we doing this now? Yeah. But
I mean, yeah, it does seem a little rushed or something.
Pretty cool game. It's also a very interesting kind of middle ground between platformer and beat 'em up that I don't know too many things to compare it to exactly. Good year for X-Men overall. For me, it's honestly between... Well, I want to give a quick shout out to Breath of Fire for being a good RPG that had to compete with Final Fantasy III. Tough luck. But for me, it's between Mega Turrican and Dragon View. I am kind of torn. My heart says Dragon View. I think Mega Turrican might be the better game overall, but Dragon View is just a game that's so under the radar for everyone that I just want to give it those props. This is one of the games that I will tell people, if you like Zelda 2, this is maybe one of the games on the Super Nintendo you should check out. Because it reminds me a little bit of Zelda 2. It's kind of a beat 'em up RPG hybrid. Even more so than Zelda 2, it kind of gives you that. But when you go into a battle, it basically plays out like a beat 'em up. But there are dungeons and things too. Technically, it's a sequel to Draken, but you do not need to play Draken. From what I can tell, Draken is not really worth playing. Yeah, just a very, very unique little game that's surprisingly well done for how under the radar it is, which to me is kind of what Underdog is all about. Mega Turrican is just like the game that probably deserves to be played just as much as like Contra Hardcore, and just it doesn't have the name recognition.
I'm a big Turrican guy. So what's your choice?
I'm leaning towards Dragon View.
Okay. Sam on Dragon View. All right. There's several games here that I really, really love. Mega Turrican is up there for me. I always loved Turrican and how chaotic it is with all of its weapons. It almost gives me like Gunstar Hero vibes if Gunstar Hero was much more methodical and slow, in a good way. So I love Mega Turrican. So another one of these that nobody else is going to talk about is Claymates. Claymates and Clay Fighter came out in the same year using the same kind of technology, and they were like, let's make clay characters and make a video game. Whereas Clay Fighter is like weird, bizarro, crazy, like how many weird characters can we come up with to make cool clay things with and throw them in a fighting game. Shout out to Mikey, who really wanted to be here and talk about Clay Fighter. Sorry that we didn't talk about Clay Fighter as much as you wanted to. I don't know. It is what it is. Claymates is a platformer where you play as one of 5 animal friends. They all have different attributes, and you transform between them depending on what part of the level you're on or what the theme of the level is. And the funny thing about the game is when you get hit, your downgrade is that you just become a blue ball of clay who has no powers. And you just have to roll over to the closest, like the closest little like device that turns you back into an animal before you die, which is so funny because it's very much like in Bomberman turning into a bomb on wheels. It's like, yeah, you're totally screwed now. Good luck. But each character having its own really fun mechanic. Like the rat runs super fast, like Sonic fast. The squirrel doesn't have a lot of mobility, but it throws acorns. The cat is like can climb trees and it has a bunch of mobility and stuff like that. And when you upgrade each character, you get a ball of clay that follows you around and you can like shoot out at enemies. So it really rewards survivability. It's such a fun platformer, and I hope people go on NSO and go play it because I really, really like it. Also, Lemmings 2. Shout out to Lemmings 2. Love Lemmings 2. Skitchin was a stupid game that Adam and I rented a lot in the Sega Genesis. About like it's like Road Rash, but you're just rollerblading and not on cars, but then you can grab onto the back of cars. I don't remember anything about it, but it made it on here because it came out in 94.
No, you basically just described the entire thing.
There you go.
It was fun, though, especially multiplayer.
Yeah. I think I have to give the vote to Claymates here.
Well, you found the one thing more of an underdog than the humble lemming, which is lumps of clay.
Rats, maybe? I don't know.
So unless there's a game about some kind of pond scum amoeba or something, then I think Claymates is.
I think the Ooze is next year.
Did that come out? I was just gonna say Ooze on Sega Genesis.
That Nevo was like a couple of years ago, where you're actually a single cell organism,
right?
For a little while.
Ooze is next year. Okay, final vote is John. You can either pick a winner or you can tie us up.
Yeah, I think this one's going to have to go to the community because similar to what Sam was saying, I honestly forgot Breath of Fire was even this year. And it's a very competent RPG, just happened to come out at a bad time. And I think that's kind of like the narrative of Breath of the Fire as a series as a whole. It just kept coming out at bad times, and it's never like the greatest RPG, but it's always really good. And also this one probably could have been on the nominated for soundtrack as well, because this soundtrack is like hard rock, like awesome soundtrack. Like I have this one on vinyl, and yeah, no, it was just a good game. I definitely think it needs to be talked about more.
All right. Well, we have a 5-way tie for underdog. We have Dragon View, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, Claymates, Breath of Fire, and Lemmings 2. And unless anybody would like to change...
I think I will change my vote to Breath of Fire.
All right.
It really is like always the bridesmaid, never the bride when it comes to RPGs.
But it's always right there, and it's always good. It's just not Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but hearing John talk about it does make me think that I'd probably swing my vote too.
That soundtrack is kicking, man.
And while I prefer the second game,
but it is quite different.
Yeah,
I mean, soundtrack wise, Breath of Fire 2 just sounds like Mega Man X2.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they reused the instruments there.
All right. Underdog of the year goes to Breath of Fire, thanks to a last-minute swing vote by Sam. That's great. Happy about that. Also, still go play Claymates. All right. Let's swing on over for a second and check out our voting over at the Community Game of the Year board. We left it up to you guys to choose what you wanted as your Community Game of the Year. We even let you guys write in games if there wasn't anything on the board that was particularly to your liking. And so we have quite a few runner-ups with 4 votes and 1 major winner. The 2 runner-ups with 4 votes, we have Mega Man X and Super Metroid. But the beast is back, guys, because Donkey Kong Country came in with 5 votes to win Community Game of the Year. I mean, I think that's appropriate. I think so. Because...
Looks like Mega Man X only has 3 votes.
Nope. Oh, you're right. You're right. This person has a very long name. Well, still.
Super Metroid takes second with 4.
Donkey Kong Country being community choice feels right because it's low barrier to entry. It's comfort food. It is not the hardest game in the world. And it is absolutely superb and fun to play still in 2024. A couple other shout outs. So with 3 votes, Final Fantasy 3, I guess Mega Man X, you're right, also had 3 votes. Sonic and Knuckles had 3 votes. And yeah, Super Punch Out with 4 votes. And then games with 2 votes, we had Donkey Kong 94 coming in. I think that was the only game with 2. Oh, we also had... Nope. And then the games with 1 votes, I will jump in really quick with Blackthorn from SNES's Life, Castlevania Bloodlines, Doom 2, Earthworm Jim, King's Quest 7, Lemmings, Wario Land, Ridge Racer, Tekken, King of Fighters 94, Need for Speed, and Eric Plunk with the write-in at the bottom, NBA Jam Tournament Edition. So, thank you everyone for helping Donkey Kong Country win something. Oh, I guess it did Best Soundtrack. That's good. But we haven't chosen Game of the Year yet. We're about to do that right now. So, here are our contestants for 1994's Game of the Year. We have Mega Man X, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy 3, Super Metroid, Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles. 6 games, 5 votes. Let's see where we all land. and we're going to start with Shannon.
So this really is just this is back to our Super Nintendo
Yeah.
with two Genesis games thrown in. So to me, this is easy. I got to go with what I went with Super Nintendo, right? Final Fantasy III. For all the reasons we've talked about earlier, I don't have anything else to add. I could go on and on, but for the sake of time, I'll just say it's like I said, it is actually my favorite RPG of all time. So I'm giving it to to Final Fantasy III. Sorry.
All right. One vote for Final Fantasy III. Sam, your vote.
I fully expect this to play out exactly like the NES Super Nintendo. When I saw what games were there, I figured whatever takes that category gets the big prize. It's Mega Man X for me. I did think about listing Donkey Kong 94, but I didn't because I knew I wasn't going to vote for it.
Yeah, that's fair. It's always nice to see Game Boy games on Game of the Year, though. My vote is Donkey Kong Country. No surprise there. I think that it being the first in a long series that's still going today that sort of kickstarted the IP says a lot about Donkey Kong Country. So let's go. John, your vote.
I'm right there with Shannon. I have to go Final Fantasy III. So that's what I chose out of all these games, and Sonic's not winning this one.
All right. Adam has an opportunity to pick our winner, or to tie us up, or to choose some other third thing.
Well, if I choose some other third thing, it's going to Final Fantasy, which I wouldn't be upset with.
There's no bad choices here.
About this. Well,
Sonic's a bad choice.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue. I like Sonic, but I'm not voting for it, so whatever.
Like, Sonic is great when you're 12 years old and it's still super rad to play with like Hot Wheels that go down the loops and stuff like that, because it's like you're doing the Hot Wheels loops in a video game platformer.
I know, but I am 12.
But when you're okay. It's just leave that in, just let that marinate for a second. This is tough because in the best Super Nintendo game category, right, we are evaluating these games on their merit as a Super Nintendo game. When it comes to the game of the year, right, I approach it a little bit differently because this is every game that came out in 1994, not just the Super Nintendo games. So I need to look at it with a little bit of a wider lens and approach this as a little bit more broadly, I guess I would say. Again, you could pick any one of these Super Nintendo games and you wouldn't be wrong. Donkey Kong Country, as you mentioned earlier, has the lowest barrier to entry. It's very easily accessible. It's beautiful to look at. It's got a absolutely banging soundtrack, but you can say that about any of these. In terms of scope as a game and setting the stage for things to come, I think the game of the year needs to go to Final Fantasy III. Honestly, like the more I think about it, because of course, like very, very first instinct, it's okay, it goes to Super Metroid. But the most recent new Metroid that we had is Metroid Dread, which is a souped up, modern, beautiful looking version of Super Metroid, more or less.
We have
Final Fantasy III. Yeah. So
just saying.
it's not out yet.
One day,
I'm just saying it exists.
Sometime.
maybe.
In terms of scale, it's the only one that you really can't, unless you're using tricks and stuff. You really can't just sit down in an afternoon after lunch and beat Final Fantasy III before dinner. Like, it's an enormous game. It's got you could write a novel. You could write a Final Fantasy III novel with the story. Playing as multiple characters, branching pathways, all of the things that were mentioned in the soundtrack award segment. I think as far as monumental achievement in video games in general as a whole, Final Fantasy III. Is it the best Super Nintendo game? Probably not, but that's also arguable. But taking a larger point of view in terms of the entire scope of video games and the history that came after it, because this is GOTY 30, right? We're not sitting here in 1994 thinking about the best game that came out this year, because things were very, very different back then, and graphics meant a whole lot more, because that's really where most of the innovation was at that point. But over the scope of 30 years, it's got to be Final Fantasy III.
All right. Well, there's no arguing my way out of this one. 3 votes for Final Fantasy III make it the 1994 Game of the Year for Retro Logic. Can't say I'm not a little disappointed, but I mean, I got 2 awards under my belt. I'm happy as a Donkey Kong fan.
You got the community to vote for you.
And
yeah, you got community.
I've never played Final Fantasy III, so it's not like I can sit here and debate you.
I'll only be disappointed if Sonic 3 wins something.
Yeah, for a minute I thought I
It's up to
was going to vote for like Bonk 3 or something.
Oh yeah,
It's like going away.
still got the community
Curveballs.
Sonic 3. Yeah, good. Great year for everyone. Really good awards. Not mad about Final Fantasy 3 at all. Obviously it deserves it. I'm happy to sit where I'm at. Let's do a few on
Your boy also won the best handheld game despite your best efforts.
That is fair. I will take that. Let's do a few honorable mentions. Any of these that you guys want to jump in on, you can talk about. We have to talk about Primal Rage. Just crazy weird. Like,
do we have to?
A game that is not a good game, but it does have dinosaurs. So there's that.
It's one redeeming.
And it has snow apes.
I think at some point I had thrown around the idea of making a literally dinosaurs award for just the best game with the best dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs.
Honestly, dude, that's not a bad idea. There's lots of dinosaurs.
Just give it to Primal Rage, I guess, automatically here, right now.
It would go to Jurassic.
Dinosaur game. Oh, that's right, Jurassic Park.
See, the funny thing is, there's actually pretty good competition for it year to year. Just through the 90s.
True.
Dude, Primal Rage is a very cool idea, but just not very well thought out.
It's not. I like the snake.
Game.
I like the snakehead dinosaur guy. Yeah, has some rad action figures. The 32X came out this year. It didn't launch anything very good, which is why we didn't talk about it. We had launching with Doom, Star Wars Arcade, Virtua Racer Deluxe. The Atari Jet.
I mean, they're good games, but
but
we had already played them.
That's
Star Wars Arcade is pretty good for a console version.
Yeah. Atari Jaguar, second year on the market with arguably 3 of its most playable games exclusives, which is Tempest 2000, Wolfenstein 3D. I guess it's not an exclusive, but whatever. And the Alien vs. Predator game. So, but nobody wanted to talk about that. So it is what it is. And then 3 games on the Turbografx that are worth mentioning: Dynastic Hero, Super Air Zonk, and Bonk 3, Bonk's Big Adventure CD. I got no love for Bonk, but if y'all want it, there it is. That is
we mentioned it.
That is the end of our show, guys. We did it. And I'm just going to do a quick recap of all the awards, all the games that won, and what we're doing with community stuff. Best NES game goes to Mega Man 6. Best SNES game goes to Final Fantasy 3. Best Sega Genesis game is a tie between Sonic 3 and Castlevania Bloodlines. We're going to let the community vote and see who wins. Best handheld game goes to Donkey Kong 94. Best PC game goes to Warcraft. Best arcade game goes to Cruisin' USA. Best soundtrack is Donkey Kong Country. Let's go. Best multiplayer game is Super Bomberman 2. Most innovative goes to Final Fantasy 3. The Plock Award for Outstanding Weirdness goes to Dynamite Headdy. Underdog of the Year is Breath of Fire. And the Community Game of the Award was Donkey Kong Country. And the 1994 Game of the Year, once again, is Final Fantasy 3. Well deserved. And that's it. At around 2 hours and 30 minutes or so, I'm pretty much spent. So
that's not bad.
No, not bad at all. Much shorter than usual. Not too much to argue about this.
We don't have 8 people here either.
Right, yeah. Which I don't mind. I think it's more fun with more people. I'm not mad about it. But, whatevs. Let's wrap things up this year. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and happy holidays and all the cool things. Hope everybody has a nice, safe, fun holiday. And we will see y'all on the next episode. Peace out.
Goodbye.
Bye now.
Goodbye.
Bye.
But yeah, if you take too much and you're not used to it, it can have a little bit of a laxative effect. So
it can clean you out.
Take it easy at first, or eat it.
It will help you sleep though.
You can tell we're men of a certain age. This is what we're talking about.
Yes.
It's gotten to that point.
That's good.
It's not. I remember there was a very crotchety old man went to my church when I was. He always told me, like, I really appreciate being able to talk to young people. I don't like hanging around the other old people because all they talk about is their what surgeries they've had recently and what
problems they're having.
Right.
I lost my leg the other day.
Oh my gosh.
That was Cecil. Well, Cecil had a prosthetic leg, war injury, and he actually loved to prank people by taking it off and just leaving it places. He was a funny guy.
He's lucky the Rocket's not around.